What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode. So if you guys saw the last video about the Mini, it wasn't exactly a good one. I was expecting to get the car going, I was expecting to get this thing driving super soon, but we had a hiccup. So I found out that the timing chain parts on the engine needed to be replaced. The bolt that was connecting the exhaust sprocket up to the exhaust cam snapped clean. Now I'm guessing I over-torqued the exhaust cam and it didn't allow anything to spin. So because of that, parts broke and they needed to be replaced. So thankfully, I have those new parts. They're gonna be going in today, and I kind of went ahead and removed the oil pan because I thought that there was gonna be some particulates in there that weren't exactly gonna be good for the engine. And I am really happy that I did. I disconnected the exhaust that was hooked up to the downpipe, pushed it back a little bit, and then I was able to get access to each of the 12-point bolts that were securing the oil pan up to the engine. And let me show you what I found. So after taking a look at the timing chain components and noticing that some of these teeth were damaged and they broke off, I knew that they had to go somewhere, and because gravity goes down, they had to go below. So when I removed the oil pan, I found a bunch of bolts and basically like little particulates inside the oil. So take a look at all the stuff that you guys see in the corner. So all of that is metal. Same with all like the little metal dust that's found below it. So it's a good thing that I removed all this now, because this would not be good if I had this circulating in the engine. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean all this stuff up, remove all of this, and basically get this to be super clean so that I can get the engine running as it should. Now, on top of that, if you guys didn't see the last video, this is essentially what happened. So this bolt here that attaches the exhaust sprocket up to the exhaust cam snapped, broke right off. It stretched somehow, and yeah, I don't know how, but I have some suspicions. I'm not exactly entirely sure how it happened, but it did happen. So I'm gonna have to clean all this stuff out and basically get this ready so that we can turn the car back on. What you guys are seeing here is the old oil that I removed from the engine. So I didn't want to just put it inside a container and get rid of it. I wanted to actually inspect it. So it's in a clear container, and I want to see if you guys can see this. So see like those little particulates that are inside the oil? It might be a little hard to see, but there's like little specks of metal that are floating everywhere. This here is all the break-in oil. It doesn't exactly smell the greatest, but it kind of did its job, I guess. Everything on the engine is in perfect condition. The only thing that got damaged is the timing stuff. With all of that oil out, along with all those particulates, we can throw this out. This isn't gonna be helpful for us. One other thing that I didn't mention that I did to the engine to make sure that it was in good condition is I did a cylinder leak down test. So what you do is you put this tool inside each of the spark plug holes, you put pressure inside each of the combustion chambers, and if you see that pressure going up when you fill it and then it decreasing and leaking out, you can tell that there's an issue. So I did that. If you guys want to see how that's actually done, you guys can find a link in the description box. But that's what I did. Everything across the board all seemed fine. So I put my borescope in there, I did the cylinder leak down test, everything's looking good. So knock on wood, this thing should be running perfectly once we get all this stuff back in. The oil filter, I'm taking that out and putting a new one in there just to play it safe. I don't want any of those metal particulates that have, let's say, circulated into that go into the engine. So I want to go clean, 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 and I want to make sure everything is done right. Again. So with it all cleaned up like this, we can now go ahead and reinstall this back on the car. So there's no metal particulates, no oil in there. So we can go ahead and install this and torque each one of these bolts up to the manufacturer spec. So I think I know why the engine failed. So when I went ahead and torqued up each of the camshafts up to the engine, I didn't turn each of the camshafts to see which way put the least amount of stress on the valve springs. So in this setting here, the valve springs are not really pushing any kind of pressure on the keepers themselves. So when you go ahead and torque each one of these bolts, you're getting a fair, accurate torque spec. If you were to do this in a different position where you're fighting against that spring pressure, you're not exactly going to be getting that same thing done. So what I did before is I tightened each one of them incrementally. So like I did this one, let's say, to a couple foot-pounds, then this one, and then I went over it again. Now, what I'm realizing now is that when you turn this, in this position right here, this is the least amount of stress, and you can like push down the valve spring, like on the camshafts, and that right there is pretty much completely bottomed out. So I'm gonna be doing it like this. I'm gonna be installing the intake side next. The exhaust side went on fine. Now just remember, it goes from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So those retainers all need to be put on top of the engine to hold the camshafts in place. Now torquing these down is gonna be tightening them from the inside out, kind of like what we did for the cylinder head. So I turn the camshaft one more time to get it in an easy spot so that I can rotate this easily and the bolts are not really being stressed. So there's not a lot of tension on each one of these cam springs that are pushing all this stuff up. So the torque spec for this is 7.3 foot-pounds. I'm gonna start on the inside and work my way out. Now, as you guys can tell, this is definitely not a cheap torque wrench, but again, when it comes to engine stuff like this, I would definitely suggest getting something nice like this. This snap-on one is kind of on the expensive side of things, but you can still find a nice torque wrench without breaking the bank. But again, thank you to one of my buddies, Zach, for lending me this thing, just so that I can verify that this is the exact torque spec. The last thing that I'd want is to put this together to find out that it's just gonna break again. So I wanna do it right, not have to worry about this later, and now comes installing the timing components. What you guys see here are the components that we removed from the Mini. So this is the entire timing set. So the only parts that we're going to reuse are this lower damper, this piece right here. We're gonna be reusing the Vanos cog. This is for an N14. If you guys have an N18, which uses dual Vanos, you'd be having two sprockets that look like this. But I'm gonna be reusing this piece here and this old exhaust sprocket. So you can see that is what snapped off. The intake one was perfectly fine, but I'm gonna be replacing everything other than those two sprockets and this hub because those were not damaged. If they were, I would replace them, but other than that, I have all new timing components to replace the chain, the guides, the bolts, these bolts here, the tensioner, this upper bolt, this upper guide, and the other bolt for the exhaust cam. So we're gonna get all that stuff installed on the car now. Next up, we're gonna be making a little soup. So I've got a container right here. I'm gonna be putting my new chain, the new crank cog, the new exhaust sprocket cog, and the Vanos cog for the intake, all in this little bucket. And I'm gonna be putting some oil in all of this just to prelude it. So you wanna do this before you're installing any of these new parts. So if they haven't ever seen oil, you need to make sure that they do now. This way, they're not gonna be prematurely wearing when you install them. Wiggle this a little around a little bit, let this sit, and then about 5-10 minutes later, we can install all this on the car. Now this next part might be a little bit over the top, but I purchased some syringes where I can pull the oil into it and then push it wherever I would like. So if I want to, let's say, lubricate the Vanos sprocket or even push it inside any of these little orifices, I can do that quite easily. Now this is also a really good way to pre-lubricate the block. So if you guys can put some oil inside each of the orifices that are in there, it will allow engine oil to circulate through there so that the engine is not technically starting up dry whenever you do the initial first start on your car. So if you guys want, I'll have some links to these things in the description box. They're like, honestly, dirt cheap. I bought 100 pack of them for like 15 bucks. I couldn't find any smaller amounts that were like kind of worth it, but 100 is definitely overkill, but they will work. So I have the timing chain, the exhaust sprocket, a brand new exhaust bolt. This is for all from BMW. I'm inserting this. The crankshaft sprocket is attached to the bottom of the cog along with the guides. So I had to put all of that in one shot. Now next up, I'm gonna be putting the intake Vanos sprocket along with the brand new bolt for it. So again, both of these bolts are torqued to yield. I'm gonna be torquing these up in the same manner that I did before. I'll give that torque spec in the description box if you guys are interested in it. I have not gone ahead to torque each one of these bolts yet, only because I need to go underneath and down at the crankshaft. I need to align the hub in there on the actual crankshaft assembly. So with the new crank bolt and the old cog, we're gonna install this down into the crankshaft area here. So the chain itself should line up inside there with the crankshaft, and the splines on the inside in there are what this bolt here goes into. So this is gonna go in there, and we're gonna have a torque spec in the description box for this, but we need to torque this after we set the pre-tensioner that's found on the cylinder head. With the crankshaft bolt now torqued up into place, along with the tensioner tool that's found on the back side of the cylinder head, we can now go ahead and install and torque each of the camshaft bolts. So both of them need to be initially torqued to 15 foot-pounds, then the exhaust sprocket gets torqued an additional 90 degrees, and the intake cam gets torqued an additional 180 degrees. Okay guys, so I have the Mini back together. The timing stuff all went on nicely. Now let's see if this thing can turn on as it's supposed to. So I have everything sorted up, everything's been torqued up, everything should be in proper working order. Now, let's see if it's actually gonna happen or not. Let's do that first initial start. So I have no fuel and no spark. So what I'm looking for right here is just to get the engine turning. Knock on wood, it works. So that is what I was initially looking for a while ago. So when I had the Mini startup last week, it didn't exactly do that. So the exhaust cam, I think, locked, didn't allow everything to turn, and it didn't allow the engine to turn over, just like how it's supposed to right here. So that is awesome. Now, next up comes actually putting the fuel back in and the spark so that we can actually get the engine to spin under its own power. Now, the issue is that I don't have insurance on the car yet, so once I turn the car on, I need to actually drive it. So tomorrow, I'm getting all that stuff done. It's Sunday right now. So after I get that stuff done, I can put the car down on the ground, put the fuel fuse back in, put the spark plugs back in, put the ignition coils on top of the engine, plug it all up, and everything should work as it should. Now, again, I have to prime the fuel system once I start that up, but as for now, this is as much as I can do. This is amazing. The Mini is working. It's going to be starting up tomorrow. So if you guys want to stay tuned and you want to see the first startup, I'm going to be having a live video on Instagram. So if you guys aren't following me, you guys can find me at milanmastracci. I'll have a link in the description box too. But the Mini is almost there. Guys, this is so good of news. Yeah, this is sick. This is like 2 years later worth of work, and it's finally coming together. So I'm excited to drive this thing. I need to do the initial break-in, which means I need to just drive it casually. I can't redline it. I can't push it hard. And I need to do that for a couple 100 kilometers. And then after that, I can drive the car and beat the living crap out of it. But that's going to be probably in about a week or so once I get all the break-in stuff sorted. But we're almost there. Guys, this is awesome. You guys can tell that I'm happy. Today's a good day. We're gonna see if we can get this Mini on the road. We'll see if we can smoke some tires, beat the crap out of this thing, redline it, and see how awesome this Mini actually is. So I put a lot of money into this thing. I have no idea as to how this is gonna handle on the road. Should be good. I've got coils, engines built, trans is built. Everything on this is pretty much sorted. So this should be a recipe for a good time. Anyways, guys, if you have any further questions about the video, comment section's down there. If you guys aren't following me, definitely do that because I'll be doing the live video tomorrow. Anyways, comment section's down there. You guys know what to do. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.